Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Transportation Committee meeting. I'm the chair, Mike Bonin, alongside with Councilwoman Adrian Martinez. Mr. Corrett should be joining us shortly, but we are going to get underway. We're going to start with the collective public comment. Mr. Spindler and Mr. Herman, you each have 3 minutes. Now. If you could set the clock for 2 minutes. He has 2 minutes on the agenda items and then 1 minute for general public comment.
Microphones, oh, okay.
So you have 2 minutes on the items you filled out cards for, and then you have 1 minute on general public comment.
You and your fucked up rules. All right, go ahead.
Yes, we have these rules because we're all little children and we can't control ourselves here. Yeah, so item 1, fuck item 1. There's no mobility. Nobody can move on these fucking streets. I could drive a goddamn shopping cart faster than on these fucked up streets by you people. Now, number 2, fuck number 2 as well, because the piece of shit in CD2, Paul Krikorian, is a goat. Yes, he's a goat. We don't like that. Number 3, we don't care about CD15. We go down there a couple of times a year. The only good thing about CD number 15 is Carmen Trutanich, who will make a comeback and kick the bar's fucking ass on those phony bar charges. Number 4, CD6. We know about that.
Oversized vehicle restrictions. So she continues to sell out the homeless living in those poor little campers. She calls them oversized vehicles. Nuri promised. She promised they could park on the street and live on the street rent-free. She broke her promise. She breaking my puppet's heart. Look at my puppet.
You lied, Nuri. You lied to the homeless living in their campers. I'm very upset. I'm crying. Yes, I'm crying because this is bullshit.
So what they do is they make it more than 22 feet long and taller than 7 feet tall. Where's the ACLU? Sue the city and make Nuri take the campers back. She loves homeless people, especially when they drop their sewage in the street. The smell of the shit is so lovely, isn't it?
You have 1 minute for general public comment, Mr. Spindler.
Yes, so...
Matters pertaining to...
Yes,
the
drug addict, yes. So, recall Mike Bonin, yay!
For matters pertaining to the Transportation Committee.
Yes, you're the chair, and you're on the Metro board, but you never show up, so that's germane. Correct, City Attorney? Yes. We can criticize public officials. Like, for example, the fat bastard walking in here, Paul Corrett's, See, under the Brown Act, we can criticize public officials. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled. I'm a puppet who knows Ninth Circuit law. Do you? No, because you don't know a fucking thing except 2 things. Drugs and sucking a dick. Yes, you know those 2 things, and you know them quite well.
Mr. Spindler, neither of those things has anything to do with transportation.
Of course it does, because we want you to fuck out so we can open up the lanes and get everybody on Mar Vista moving to work in the morning. Remember, we don't want you fucking with people in the commute. Finally, fuck Mike Bonin!
Okay, Mr. Spindler's time is up. Mr. Herman, you have 2 minutes on the items you filled out cards for, and then you'll have 1 minute for general public comment. And I'm going to, Mr. Spindler, I'm giving you your only warning now. The next thing you do that's disruptive, this is your only warning, Mr. Herman. Your time has not started. You have each been given your first and only warning. Another thing that's disruptive, and you're going to be asked to leave this room. You now have 2 minutes for the items you filled out cards for.
Now that my feelings are hurt, I want to talk about item number 1, Transportation Department of ongoing projects and program transit services offered because I was threatened by the fucking mobility for pedestrian cyclists. But we've become the hit and run fucking capital of Los Angeles, like I said earlier during general public comment. in the earlier 10 o'clock meeting with that fucking Jew. And then I go to item fucking 2, that fucking and he tells me the same shit, that I have to stick to the topic. And I told him, my ass is an oversized vehicle, you motherfucker. That's what I use to carry my load when I go down the streets in pursuit of the Los Angeles Municipal Code. So why the fuck you want to put an 80 section 694 on my big fucking California vehicle, bitch? And then I go to item number 3, because I only get 2 fucking minutes after my feelings were fucking hurt. Mr. Busciano, that fucking stupid cop, is talking about his establishments of oversized fucked up vehicles and fucked up streets in his fucked up neighborhoods. Fuck you, 15. And then I go to item number 4, CD6. I'm not going to say it, but no, fuck that bitch too. I'm going to item number 5, now CD11. I'm going to talk about the expos of what? Environment Equality Act, nigga. I gotta stop crying because people gotta know the facts. Fuck you too. And then I go to item 6, which is the fat bald fuck Jose Weezer, who ran off stage when Mr. Spindler was going to speak about the relevant established goal and implementation of transporting 100% zero emission buses in 2030. Well, we're going to tear down those motherfucking placards with Jose Weezer's name because he fucked up our city. We all know that. And then we're going to go to my last closing 10 seconds on item number 9 after I fill out a card on every motherfucking item. $6.60 million for Measure R funds. Fuck you. You haven't done shit.
Time is up, Mr. Herman. You now have 1 minute for general public comment, which means comments regarding matters involving transportation.
Now that we're begging for the road diets to be removed, we've petitioned this Transportation Commission to remove all road diets. All our fucked up streets are congested. And we can't wait to open up those lanes. You just put a fucking stupid bike ramp out there for bicyclists in front of City Hall. What did it cost us? You might as well let Jose Weezer fuck Francine Godoy on the bridge, because that's how the money's being spent. $185 fucking dollars for a fat bald fuck and his wife and kids and the one that's dying with cancer. I have no fucking pity for transportation. No fucking way. We must recall Bonin, the fucking dumb drug addict who announced he has issues of drug and violence, the way he threatened me earlier. So on the record, 42 U.S.C. 1983, California Constitution, fuck you.
Time is up, Mr. Herman. Leah Memzik, you have, please come on up. You have 1 minute for item number 1 and then a minute for public comment, general public comment.
1 minute for item 1?
Yes, and then 1 more minute after that for general public comment.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so item number 1, the general manager, it's missing the name. So could I know who the general manager for DOT?
Here.
Hi, what's your name?
Hi, Salita Reynolds.
Thank you. Okay. Secondly, could we get a copy of the report so it's not verbal? And then 3, it's really important to know that Asilomar right now has a landslide problem, and you haven't taken into consideration the landslide itself. And why that's so important is I feel like I'm being discriminated against because the Bel Air Bay Club is not part of one of the projects. It's not an ongoing project. And you have the slope indicators that are broken. So if it falls down, you could kill everybody on Pacific Coast Highway. I have to tell you, it's really, it's a joke to be here. 5 years. I'm on public comment.
Okay, now you have 1 minute for general public comment. Just you need to contain your comments to matters regarding transportation, matters that are within the jurisdiction of this committee.
And Mr. Bonin, during the course of her testimony, Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler were making considerable noise, including calling her a bitch from the background. I would like.
Okay, Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler, I'd like you both to leave, please.
And I didn't even talk about the other bitch, so don't say I said a bitch.
Hey, you're not allowed to say anything from the audience.
Bitch. All right, bitch? You like to bitch me? I'll bitch back. Because I'm a nigger with a bitch attitude. NWA.
Mr. Spindler, you as well. You as well.
You were both talking with each other, loudly interrupting. Hey, I heard you. Not true. I heard you.
For those of you who are new to Los Angeles City Hall, apologies for the irregular display. It is a consequence of our very much cherished First Amendment that sometimes we have to put up with this here. But happy Halloween. That should beat any haunted house you go to. Please, you have 1 minute of general public comment for matters pertaining to transportation.
I'd like to bring to your attention there's an unsafe condition in the public property Arno Way and Trina Way in tract 10179. Turns out there's a moving landslide at 100 feet, 40 feet, 20 feet, and a high water table, and you've discriminated against the people in that area. It's the closest area to Pacific Coast Highway, which means if it falls down, you could wipe out everybody. And you've concealed the record. I can't get it. So right now you have 3 projects. They're under review in the City Planning Department, and they say it's not in their jurisdiction. But the California Environmental Quality Act actually says you have a duty, you have a responsibility. Those are mandatory words. And so without providing the information, it looks like you're complicit with wanting it to fall down. You willfully, deliberately want it to fall down. I'm now here 5 years in every single office having to put together. It's such a hardship. It's so cruel to me. But the people have a right to know what the records say. They have a right to know if that hill's going to fall down, and they have the right to know if you know it. So,
thank you. Just for the record, you don't come to Transportation Committee that often. That didn't really pertain to a matter within the jurisdiction of this committee.
It's a public road. It's a public road, and it is in your jurisdiction.
I'm trying to be helpful to you. I'm trying to be helpful to you. It doesn't pertain to a matter in this committee. I let you speak for your full 1 minute, even though it wasn't germane to the matters of this committee. I would be happy to have my staff provide you a list of each council committee and what is under the jurisdiction of each of those committees. The matter you raised is more appropriate for the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, and I'm happy to get you that list so it facilitate your public comment.
And they met yesterday, by the way.
And they met yesterday. Thank you. Okay.
Could you clarify the room what transportation means if it doesn't mean public streets?
I'll get you a copy of the listing of the different committee assignments. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, unless there's any objection, I recommend we move items 2, 3, and 4 on consent.
No objection?
No objection. That's the direction of the committee. Also recommend we continue item number 5 until December 13. Any objection? Seeing none, that is also the direction of the committee. So let us go to item number 1.
Item number 1 is the General Manager from LADOT to present a verbal report relative to the department's ongoing projects and recognition of DOT employees for outstanding service.
Good afternoon, committee members. It is my great honor to give our, normally as part of our verbal report, we recognize some outstanding employees from LADOT.
You got a tough act to follow.
What's that?
You got a tough act to follow today.
Ladies and gentlemen in the opposition. So, first, I want to acknowledge a special individual from Project Delivery and Operations, Lily O'Brien, Deputy of Communications and External Affairs from the Active Transportation Division. So prior to joining LADOT's Vision Zero team in 2017, Lily was the program manager for the Great Streets Initiative in the mayor's office. Her strong communication skills and Get Things Done initiative made her a great choice as project manager for the new strategic plan for LADOT. The updated plan is currently in final production and presents an updated version of the department's strategies, goals, and benchmarks that will guide LADOT's work for the next 3 years. Soon after starting work at LADOT leading communications and external affairs for Vision Zero, Lily was tasked with also leading the department's strategic plan update because we didn't think she was busy enough. In this role, she successfully directed the project consultant team and led the collaboration of numerous stakeholders, including 4 strategic plan working group meetings during which 75 LADOT employees who represented all of the diverse business lines and classifications throughout the department met to provide their input and ideas for the update. She worked with the executive management team to build consensus among the leadership, as well as the mayor's office and the Transportation Commission. Generally, strategic plan updates with this amount of detail take organizations more than a year to complete. However, Lily's strong work ethic, agility, persistence, and enthusiasm helped to move the process swiftly, and the plan was completed in 5 months. LADOT and the City of LA are lucky to have such a talented, diligent, and dedicated employee. And a little bit of background on Lily. She grew up in Detroit. Her parents are organizers, and she has been facilitating community meetings since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. So we definitely need that skill in LADOT, and we're very, very lucky to have her with us. Thanks, Lily. Also from Project Delivery and Operations, Yvonne Thompson, Engineering Aid 1 from the Surveys section. Yvonne Thompson is an engineering aide who's worked in our traffic surveys section for the past 17 years. Yvonne has always been a conscientious and dedicated employee, but has recently elevated her game and has been very actively involved with our renewed efforts to address the backlog of speed surveys. Her organizational skills, thoughtfulness, and hard work were critical in our success during the past year in bringing hundreds of miles of our streets up to date for speed enforcement. She often works at odd hours of the day to help the section meet critical deadlines. Yvonne voluntarily prepared guidance documents, tables, conducted research on best practices, and developed a great working relationship with our contractor in order for us to be able to present the speed limit report today. She helped organize staff, worked diligently to review contract deliverables, and even kept her supervisors in line. I'm sure there's a good inside joke in there somewhere. She even rewards good work with some fresh-baked cookies now and then, helping to keep everyone's morale up. She is an asset to the department and the city, and we are lucky to have her. Thanks, Yvonne. And now from Administration and Field Services, Charles Andrews, Sign Shop Supervisor. Charles Andrews has been at LADOT for 10 years. He promoted in 2015 to Sign Shop Supervisor and since has run an efficient operation. The Sign Shop is responsible for delivering a high volume of fabricated signs, including a variety of non-standard signs, such as warning and construction signs. With his leadership, the Sign Shop is able to meet all expedited requests from key stakeholders like the council offices, mayor's office, parking enforcement, and LADOT management. In fiscal year 16-17, the Sign Shop fabricated close to 4,000 signs. Charles is diligent in his work, and his professionalism and dedication are key to having the proper signs on our streets for people to get around the city safely. Thank you, Charles. And that's all I have.
So let me just say again a thank you to Charles and to Lily and to Yvonne for all your great work. And Salita for doing these presentations. Usually we don't hear city employees talked about in these terms except when they're retiring. So I was actually, when you were doing, I was feeling sad. I'm like, oh no, we're losing her. And then I realized you're not retiring, we still have you. So I want to thank all three of you. And Charles, in particular, I want to commend you and your staff for being able to consistently spell Buscaino correctly. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that brings us now to, let me do items number 7 and 8 together while we have them. We have one person for both items, Camruz Farhadi. Do you want to come up?
Item number 7 is a Rue Rodriguez motion relative to instructing DOT with the assistance from LAPD and the fire department to report on a list of routes and streets which are unsafe for tour buses to operate on pursuant to AB 25 Nazarian. And item number 8 is again a Rodriguez motion relative to trusting the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance which would prohibit the use of loudspeakers on tour buses that have had their roofs substantially structurally modified.
Great. You filled out cards for both items. We're taking them both together, so I'll give you a total of 2 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to state I represent Starline Tours, and we are one of the larger transportation companies within the city. We employ approximately 250 people, and therefore 250 families depend on us. We consider ourselves as having been born here in LA and belonging to LA, and consider ourselves an important part of the city and try to work the best we can in conjunction with the city. We feel that under item 7, the requirements should be with discussion between both the transportation companies and the city, so that we can come between us to an understanding of what is required both for the residents of the city and the sightseeing population who's coming here to visit the city. And we would like to ask for the opportunity to participate in that way with the members of Mr. Rue's, Council Member Rue, and also the city's representatives to make that happen. On point 8, I would like to offer my support for the motion, and at the same time ask that there's a certain amount of saying other matters. Would like to know what those might be so that we can again participate in understanding and accommodating those requirements. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Colleagues, does anybody have any questions for staff on these motions?
I do. I only have a question on 8.
Is staff from DOT here?
I know
Right.
the bill allows us to implement our own regulations, but this is more for the department. So if we will become the permitted entity, does will DOT be able to inspect the operators, or how do you intend to do this? Are you creating a complaint system so that neighbors can have a number to call in if these tour buses are not complying with our regulations? How does the department intend to do this?
We haven't worked it out right now, but
so you don't know.
the intent of this action is to recommend that we move forward to develop the policies and procedures to address both the noise
and the
issues
reason I bring this up is we love to come up with rules and so on and codes and so on. My only issue is how are we going to enforce it?
Well, this would be this would not be a Department of Transportation enforcement because it's
Okay.
sound. It'd be LAPD.
So would it be another task for LAPD?
Number 8 is LAPD. They have to do the enforcement. Oh, by the way, Brian Gallagher, Transportation
Yes,
Department, for the record.
Thanks, Brian.
But the department is going to be in charge of coming up with the regulations? So what is your role?
I'm here mainly for number 7,
Oh,
Right.
okay.
but for number 8, I don't know if there's anybody here that can answer those questions.
We'll comply with the new AB 25. We'll look at it. I believe there are criminal penalties for violation, and if that's the case, it would be LAPD. It would be LAPD for sound as well. So we will look at it and we will determine. We'll come back. Obviously, and we'll have.
So when you report back on that, you'll have those options. Okay.
So then let me go back to 7 since you're here on 7. So can we set up the parameters for which types of streets should be considered for restrictions?
Yes,
Can we do that?
that's something that Transportation Department will take the lead on, but we'll also work with the Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Street Services, and as well as the Police Department, and maybe some of the council offices that are up on Mulholland Drive where the reports seem to be the most problematic at this time.
Do you know what types of conditions the department is looking at to develop? Do you know?
We'll look at the roadway geometry to see if there's issues where maybe the turns are too tight on the road to accommodate certain types of vehicle profiles. We'll also look at the crash patterns to see if we have crashes related to tour buses or sightseeing buses or even trucks, because of maybe if large type vehicles are getting involved in crashes, then maybe that would be a sign that the tour buses might be included in that mix, and we would need to do further investigation.
Yeah, so I'm very well aware that it's not in my district, nor does it really impact my district, but as someone who drives through the canyons, those are pretty narrow hillsides, so that's why I'm asking.
Well,
because
the biggest-
I've seen these tour buses get up in these tight hillsides, and it's tight to get by them. It's very dangerous.
I spent a lot of time up on Mulholland Drive, and it's not just the tour buses that are driving on the roads, but it's the tour buses that are parked in the one traffic lane across the street from the scenic outlook. and then unloading, 10 pedestrians across the street right past a blind curve. If the tour buses were not allowed to be up there in the first place, we would not have pedestrians that mainly from outside the city crossing the street where there's a blind curve, not knowing that cars or even speeding motorcycles are going to be coming around that corner and not able to see them.
And that's what I think needs to be emphasized as opposed to just being a nuisance for people who live up there. It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous situation, and we're liable no matter what. So
That's
I just want to make sure that that point gets across. I don't think we communicate that.
Item number 7 is all about safety. The safety for the drivers, as well as the safety for the pedestrians, safety for bicyclists, safety for all roadway users.
Great. I'd also ask, I know the conversation has largely been about hillsides, but I'd ask that you, when you confer with LAPD, to also talk with maybe West LA traffic. There are particular areas in Venice that might be of concern as well.
Oh, that's a good one to include, too, down there by the boardwalk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the canals, areas near the beach, stuff like that. Okay, so we'll ask you to report back in 60 days, and if you could also take a meeting with the tour bus folks in development before we report back.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so 7 and 8 are approved. For item 7, that's a report back in 60 days, and for item 8, that's just approved as is. So let us go now to, colleagues, I just noticed item number 9, there's no speaker cards on that. Does anybody have any questions on 9? Should I?
Consent.
Hold on for just a second and make sure. No, I'm good.
Okay, so we'll provide item number 9 on consent as well. So we will go to item number 6.
Item number 6 is a Weezer, Bonner, and Blumenfield motion relative to establishing a goal and implementation of transitioning to 100% zero-emission bus fleet by 2030 or earlier.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm
How you
Kerry
doing?
Dadarian with the Transit Bureau.
Actually, before we have staff come up and react to some proposed amendments Mr. Weezer and I want to make, we have a bunch of speaker cards. Michelle Kinman, Jimmy O'Day, Erica Thea Patterson, Jennifer Krupke.
You have 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, Michelle Kinman with Environment California and the LA County Electric Bus Coalition. And from where I sit, I think it's pretty clear that the electric bus revolution is both inevitable and happening now. And I say that for a number of reasons. I think electric buses are just a far superior technology in terms of the public health, environmental, and safety concerns, in terms of the economics, and in terms of the fact that they are available today and being manufactured right here in Southern California, providing tremendous job opportunities.
Yeah. Excuse me just 1 second, if you could hold their time, or I'll keep a look on it. If folks in the back could take their conversations outside, please. It's a little hard to hear the speakers. So she has, go back to 35 seconds.
We'll have to just add it on.
If you can.
I can't add it. I'll just have to mentally add it on because it's under a minute.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And so for all of these reasons and more, we're of course seeing decision makers all across the country. We need to look no further than LA Metro, of course, making the commitment to a 100% electric bus future. And so I think the question for LA City is really not whether the electric bus revolution is happening, but do you want to be in the driver's seat of this revolution and make this commitment? Thank you. Do I have more time? I have one more thing to say.
10 more seconds if you want.
Okay, I just want to wrap up real quickly by saying I think the answer is yes, undoubtedly, whether we're talking about baseball or buses, it's clear LA can be and wants to be number one. So thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, afternoon. My name is Jimmy O'Day. I'm with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and we fully support DOT's transition to fully electric bus fleet. The 2030 goal is great, but it'd be even better to showcase the world a clean bus fleet for the 2028 Olympics. The technology really is here. There's major manufacturers that are competing for this business. I was just at an event where a bus maker unveiled a 236-mile bus range So the technology is certainly here, made in California, made in Southern California even for many of the companies. The emissions are low. An electric bus on today's grid in California and LADWP, even with the coal, is by far the cleanest option available. And I have a couple copies of reports to share if you're interested in looking at that. And we're seeing a great action at the state level to incentivize this. The low carbon fuel standard and the governor's budget will help these a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Erica T. Patterson here with Jobs Move America, and as a member of the LA County Electric Bus Coalition, I'm here today to express our strong support for the electrification of LA DOT's bus fleet. We know this transition is a crucial move to reduce harmful pollutants impacting bus operators, passengers, and our communities. But beyond these obvious environmental and public health benefits, this transition could also generate good, clean jobs in manufacturing and charging unit installation. With its intentional policies, we've seen agencies like LA Metro achieve cleaner buses, all while creating career pathways into the middle class for low-income communities of color, and we would like to see LA DOT achieve the same. And then the city can create more success stories that Metro has already achieved through using policies like the U.S. Employment Plan, which has been legally vetted by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jennifer Kropke. I'm with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 11, as well as the National Electrical Contractors Association. You've already heard about the environmental benefits. You've heard a little bit about the job creation benefits, but we also want to encourage you to think about this not just in terms of the air and the jobs, but as well as the charging infrastructure. There are very real, sustainable solutions that will complement the electric charging infrastructure. Thinking about solar arrays on the canopies for all of our buses for people who are waiting, battery storage, microgrid utilization. All of these provide opportunities for our local Angelenos to get to work and to have jobs that pay them in clean energy. While many people are studying a just transition, we are working here in Los Angeles to create it with renewable energy jobs. So we are here to speak in favor of number 6, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Next, four speakers, Adrian Martinez, Evan Gillespie, Rebecca Schenker, and Alexandra Nagy. Go ahead, Adrian.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Martinez, and I'm here on behalf of Earth Justice. I'm here today to support the City of LA moving to zero-emission electric buses. I want to address one issue. Our coalition has requested that there be a prioritization for disadvantaged communities. First, this is a hot topic throughout the state as we're trying to get more zero-emission vehicles in disadvantaged communities. This should include buses, not only passenger vehicles. Sierra Club, Earth Justice, and Jobs to Move America commissioned an expert from Georgia Tech University to explore how you would do that at LA Metro. We're going to be releasing the results in the next month. That can be done for LA City's routes. This is a good way to make sure that those who need emissions benefits most receive the benefits first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Evan Gillespie. I work with the Sierra Club, and I'm here with the LA County Electric Bus Coalition. Number of speakers have already made these points, so I just want to quickly summarize a couple key points. This is a great policy, and we thank you all for your leadership on this. There are a whole host of complementary policies that can come along with this to realize the full benefits that electric buses can bring to a city like Los Angeles. So in addition to making the commitment to electric buses, we want to make sure that the procurement is done right, and we think the U.S. Employment Plan is a great guide for how to do procurement in a way that encourages good jobs and ensures that historically excluded communities get the benefits of these jobs. We want to make sure that the buses ultimately are powered with clean energy as opposed to fossil fuel power plants, that the buses are prioritized in EJ communities. And then the last little tweak on this is that, with the Olympics coming in 2028, it would be great for all of our athletes and the visitors from around the world to come to LA to ride on electric buses as well. So, we're encouraging folks to look at a slightly faster date to align with the Olympics and showcase our leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Shanker. I'm here with BYD, and I'm here to express our strong support for a zero-emission LADOT bus fleet. I really want to speak to some of the commercialization and readiness aspects here. So BYD is a global electric bus manufacturer. Our North American headquarters are in the city of LA. We have manufacturing up in LA County. And in the last 6 years, we've delivered over 27,000 electric buses globally. 140 of those have been here in the U.S. We have another 300 in order and 300 beyond that. But this movement is bigger than just BYD. California has 250 electric buses on the road. We have several manufacturers who've expanded their facilities for manufacturing here in Southern California. These are really important, good jobs. And not only are these buses viable today, but they also continue to improve. We've seen transit technology, energy density improvements, and manufacturing scale enable us to lower our prices by $325,000 per bus in the last 6 years.
Thank you. Alexandra?
Yes. Hello, my name is Alexandra Nagy. I'm with Food and Water Watch and also the LA County Electric Bus Coalition. I want to thank the committee for bringing this forward today. This is a deeply personal issue for communities who are living near gas infrastructure and who live along bus lines that need to go electric. I just wanted to thank SoCalGas and George Minter for submitting that letter to the committee. I think it really highlights what my work has shown, is that the gas company is willing to go to extreme lengths to lie to promote their bottom line. I really encourage you to listen to the values of the people who want to see electrification happen now, who want our communities desperately to get off natural gas and renewable natural gas, because in any form the emissions are there and it's poisoning people. This is a matter of life and death. So please listen to the people. Don't listen to SoCalGas. They've clearly outlined what their choices are, and we've made ours very clear as well. So please listen to the people.
Thank you. You threw me there for a second when you were throwing out the love to the gas company. First, Trump came out against the Delta tunnels today. I'm like, wow, we get some strange environmental coalitions going on. Let me just start as one of the makers of the motion by first of all, saying thank you to the Electric Bus Coalition and everybody who came here to testify on behalf of these today. We had the opportunity to work together on this issue around the block over at Metro a couple months ago, and I want to thank these organizations for really forcing the spring and the dawn of the moment of electric vehicles here in Los Angeles. We are in California and in Los Angeles, the headquarters of the resistance in a number of fronts, and immigration and environment are two of the biggest ones. And we have an opportunity to set an example here, and because of the work the coalition has done, Metro has said, okay, we're going to do it. And even before Metro did it, I was with the mayor and Salida at a press conference back in January or February, where we were unveiling some of our own electric buses. So LA City has been leading on this, and this will push us even further. So thank you for that, and thank you to DOT for that. Mr. Weezer and I had a couple suggested amendments we wanted to put in to sort of flesh out some of the stuff that folks testified about. But before I do that, I just wanted to give Martin Schlageter from Mr. Weezer's office an opportunity to comment. If you want to tee up some of that stuff, feel free.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chair, Council members, Martin Schlageter with Councilman Jose Weezar's office. I'm happy to be here, that you've scheduled this, and happy to partner with your office, Mr. Chair, on continued efforts to clean up our transportation network. I think this is a very important one, as indicated by the comments previously. Our public transportation fleet should not be the least among our transportation investments. They should be foremost among them as an equity issue, and we think it's important to move then to the cleanest available vehicles. I do believe that while we set a target of 2030 in our recommendation here, in our motion, ideas for how to expedite that are welcome, and ideas for how we can continue to reduce fossil fuel use and improve cleanliness in the interim are critical. So while we shift to zero-emission vehicles and electric fleet, where there's opportunities to reduce fossil fuel use, including through the potential use of renewable natural gas, that is something worth looking into. We would want to know from the department certainly any obstacles or challenges in the supply line to that. But as a role for our existing natural gas fleet to continue to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels to get to a zero emission and an electric future, there may be near-term actions we can take as well. And with that, I appreciate, again, your partnership and leadership on this issue and welcome all action to move us as expeditiously as possible to a zero-emission electric fleet.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks to Councilman Huizar. So a few suggestions Mr. Huizar and I wanted to make to add to the direction to staff. One is about jobs, one is about equity and environmental justice, and one is about making sure there's an actual build-out plan. The first one is ask that we implement what's called a U.S. employment plan. That is a U.S. DOT-approved contract language that makes sure that there are good jobs provisions to contracting for electric buses. It gives added weight during procurement to companies that have robust workforce development programs and prioritize employment of women, people of color, veterans, people returning to civilian life from criminal justice system, people experiencing poverty and or homelessness, among other targeted groups. The second item is ask that we provide the benefits of electric buses to disadvantaged communities by developing an implementation plan that prioritizes electrification of bus lines that serve environmental justice communities, starting with the top 25% overburdened communities within Cal EnviroScreen 3.0. And the third is to implement a comprehensive infrastructure plan that integrates renewable energy into the initial source of energy. To do that, LADOT should create an infrastructure working group that includes representatives from labor, utility companies, community organizations, and other key stakeholders determined by the assembled group to create infrastructure build-out plans. So those are the motions we wanted to toss out. Discussion? Yes, please, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I certainly appreciate having a larger conversation about how technologies can impact the environment, but also, most importantly, how these technologies can also impact neighborhoods. So no one ever talks about where the electricity comes from. It comes from somewhere. And I just want to ensure that it doesn't overburden communities like mine. So, you know, nothing is 100% emission-free. And so I just want to ensure that the DWP's energy is a mixture of it's a mixed bag. It comes from multiple energy sources. So I never hear about, in terms of having to plug into somewhere, where exactly is the energy coming from. And I would hate for this to somehow, we just need to ensure that the new power is we're not overburdened communities like Sun Valley, that we don't have to fire up generating stations like the one in Sun Valley or like the one at Scattergood. So the other thing that I was concerned about in the motion is that there is no mention or reference to any coordination with DWP. And I really feel like we need to make sure that they're at the table. And so if anything, I want that to be also be made part of the motion. And I also would like to request that the report gets sent back to my committee on energy and environment so we can have a further discussion on how we can, how this does not impact communities like I just mentioned. So if I can ask that the report include the coordination of DWP to ensure that the power system is equipped to handle should we transition into all this electric fleet. So I just want to make sure that's in it as well. But I had other questions for the department. I don't know who's here to answer questions, but I had a few questions of my own.
Sure.
Is anybody here?
Yeah.
And my first question is, what kinds of changes do we need to make to our facilities in order for us to potentially accommodate this new technology? What do we need to do?
We need to electrify them the new maintenance facility that we're building already takes that into account. As we acquire additional facilities, we do have a grant to study what the needs are going to be within those committees so we can report back.
We would have to upgrade the facility and upgrade our fleet. So what happens to Dash, for example? Would that be the responsibility of the city, or would Dash, for example, would that be on the company itself?
No, it would be because of the requirement of electrification. We have started a process to acquire the facilities that we had traditionally leased through our contractors. As we acquire those facilities, they would become city facilities, and we would electrify them accordingly ourselves.
And how would we pay for that?
We would go after grants. It's a little bit down in the future, but we would definitely be going after grants and budgeting.
And in terms of the battery life, what's the battery life from something like this? And do we have a process by which we dispose of batteries? And what kind of impact would it have in communities that are currently manufacturing these types of batteries?
We are going through a learning curve today as it stands with batteries. One of the buses we're testing, the battery life, expected battery life is for 12 years, and there are multiple proposed usages after the battery ends its life in the transit world. But we are testing, hopefully, another technology also with another manufacturer. Currently, we're looking in at building a battery replacement for 6 months because we do not know exactly what to expect with the batteries and as time goes by what their degradation is going to be. So we are under the study phase of all these.
And that's my point. As much as I support this, I also know that there's somehow a community will end up paying the price for this. So how are we disposing of the batteries? What's the impact of the communities who end up with one of these facilities in their neighborhoods? So those are questions that seldom do we ever get to ask, and it's communities of color who end up with the burden of having to, power the rest of the city. That's how this, in my opinion, how the city was built, and this is why we have such environmental issues in parts of my district. So I just want to make sure that as we're moving forward, that we're just not talking about environmental justice as an afterthought, but that we're actually taking into consideration how we dispose of this stuff. Where's the electricity coming from? What communities are going to share the burden in making sure that we go 100%, emissions-free? I just want to make sure that those questions are answered before we start moving in this direction.
Understood. And we will include all those details in the report back. But we also have, we're developing an RFP. We're just are thinking along those lines. We are developing an RFP with the help of a consultant in order to look at what technologies are out there and what the different approaches may be. And this will be included as one of the aspects of that also.
Okay. All right. All friendly amendments. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you and Mr. Weezar for bringing this forward. Obviously, as we've seen in Houston and other places with hurricanes and wildfires across the state and throughout the country, we see that climate change impacts us more quickly than we ever thought each time. So we clearly have more of a need to get off fossil fuels completely and forever as quickly as possible. Now, I was lucky enough to tour the BYD electric bus factory out in Lancaster a few weeks ago with Mayor Paris, and I saw them making the next generation of buses and some other vehicles that can be used by cities. Right now, only 70 miles away, and they're not waiting around. They're making it happen, and their city is, I believe, carbon neutral already, which is remarkable for a relatively conservative city and a Republican mayor, but they're providing the leadership that hopefully we will rapidly join them in. I think it's important that we focus on electric and we don't get diverted for a while longer in focusing on natural gas, either renewable or even not renewable. I don't think anyone has the infrastructure to store it and deliver it properly, as we've seen with Aliso Canyon and even on an ongoing basis. They had 39 wells opened, and I think 13 of them have already been shut down because of their inability to function correctly. It's still leaking out there. And I certainly would discourage us from continuing to go down a natural gas path and then find that we have stranded assets that we've wasted our money on. So I would encourage that we head in an all-electric direction, that we aim for 2025, not only because of climate change, which is being given a timeline that's shorter and shorter. Scientists believe that 10 years or less of us continuing down the same path could spell the end of the human race, as overdramatic as that sounds. So I would encourage us to go for 2025, and for the other reason that has been mentioned, we obviously have an Olympics in 2028. We want to be able to feature the city as a carbon neutral place and have a carbon neutral Olympics by then. And we can't start it in 2027. It will take a few years to get to that place. So that's what I would encourage. I do have a couple questions as well.
Let me just say, I don't think you were being even mildly dramatic when you were talking about the fragility of the human race in this issue. I think you were spot on.
And we probably won't see it in 10 years, but we will have impacted it and caused it if we don't turn everything around, which is why this whole effort is so critical, and I'm so excited about it. What are the dirtiest buses in our fleet, and what are we planning to do to replace those, and how quickly?
We have been using clean fuel for more than 12 years, so currently our dirtiest buses would be the propane-powered buses that we have, and they're up for replacement as we speak.
So when we replace them, are we still considering using any kind of fossil fuels, or are we going to go all electric at this point?
Those are slated to be replaced by CNG, but the new ultra-low emission CNG engines.
Do we include a life cycle assessment of natural gas vehicles in terms of their climate change causing footprint, as opposed to just the emissions here in LA?
The life cycle of the buses are usually mandated by the
Not the buses, the natural gas, and getting from where it starts to us and the environmental impacts of that.
No.
We should, and I think it's a mistake to go down that path. So in any way that we can prevent that, I would be an enthusiastic supporter of that. I don't know if that could be done as part of this motion or not, but if so, I'd encourage us to look at including it.
Is there a suggested amendment you want to make?
Well, I would amend that. Amend our bus purchasing process to be limited to vehicles that are electrically powered.
Is, Mr. City Attorney, is that beyond the scope of today's action, or?
You're right on the line. I think a motion like that is a major amendment, obviously.
Well, this measure is about going all electric and to a large degree, so I think it's just speeding the process a little bit.
To amend a major policy,
We,
might want to
if
for the feasibility of that.
If I may, Councilman, again, we'll discuss it in detail in the report, but we are under contract to purchase 45 more CNG buses, but prior to that and after that, we are committed to only purchasing electric buses. It's just that the contract, the consortium that we joined was done back in May 2016, if I'm not mistaken, and we're obligated by that procurement process to purchase 45 to 90 buses. We have already internally limited that to the minimum number possible. So after that 45 purchase, we will no longer be purchasing CNG vehicles.
Well, we've continued to learn pretty earth-shattering things about fossil fuels. Could that not be used as a justification to negate that part of the contract?
I don't know all the legalities at this moment sitting here, but we did join the Livermore procurement process.
Let me suggest that might make more sense as a separate motion, only because it seems like there's some legal issues to work out there, and I wouldn't want those to, because no offense, but once you start having to bring attorneys into the room, it generally doesn't speed the process up.
Could we ask them to separately study this issue and bring something back as part of this?
I just don't want to slow down any of this process.
Can I just
that
add
we've already
one
talked
thing
about.
as well? We don't have the money to buy 45 electric buses right now because they cost a lot more. So it's not, we have these buses that are at the end of their useful life. We need to replace them for safety reasons and legal reasons. And the money that we have available, we've aggressively sought grants. We've been successful in getting some grants to upgrade several purchases that we've made. But for this one, we really do need to move the contract forward. If we were to not do that, we would need to identify the additional funds right now that would be required to convert that to an all-electric procurement and work out the legal issues around whether or not we're allowed to violate our contract.
So let me suggest, and see if this is the consensus of the committee, that we approve the Bond and Weezer motion as amended by me and Ms. Martinez, and then we ask for a separate report back from DOT and City Attorney on the feasibility and how to implement Mr. Koretz's suggestion.
That sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Great.
Any other questions?
Can I just clarify what all the amendments are so we can go? Okay, so the three from the chair are related to the jobs and the U.S. employment plan, equity, and the infrastructure working group. And then Councilmember Martinez was insurance that the sources of the power don't unequitably burden specific communities, as well as the disposal of batteries and that.
I can read you my motion.
Okay.
Do that.
Okay.
So I want to request a report back to be sent to my committee, the Energy and Environment Committee. This report should also include coordination with DWP to ensure that the power system is equipped to handle should we transition to an all-electric fleet.
And then the separate report on the department working with the city attorney on their replacement plan to transition to all-electric vehicles.
Yes, and also something I mentioned but didn't get included, which is looking at the feasibility of a 2025 date for all
So
of
the
this to
23rd,
happen.
yes, okay.
Okay, so CLA is clear? Clicker's clear? Everybody else clear? Okay, good. More or less? Okay, so that's the direction of the committee. And that brings us, I believe, to the remaining item number 10.
Item number 10 is the LADOT and city attorney reports and ordinance relative to changing the speed limit revisions and additions for various streets in the city.
So we have LADOT and LAPD to come to the table and help us with this. So as you're taking your seats, let me just preface this with my now customary rant on this subject. I hate when we are in this situation. I really, really do. Where the only way to bring a fraction of protection for pedestrians, children, seniors in our neighborhoods, and enforce the law requires us to, in some cases, raise the speed limit. Different levels of government are always in conflict over stuff, misunderstandings, priorities that are not always in sync. This has got to be, this is a result of what has got to be the stupidest, most confounding state law I have ever experienced. When I have to go out and explain to constituents, and I make it abundantly clear it's a state law, that in order to enforce a speed limit, we have to do a survey, and the rule is that if people are speeding, we have to raise the speed limit. It is, they look at me appropriately as if it is the stupidest thing they have ever heard. It is just absolutely absurd and stupid. I know when he was in the legislature, Mr. Krikorian tried to fix this rule, and it wasn't successful. I implore everyone in Sacramento to take a look at this again, because we want to be lowering speeds. I mean, we have seen again and again with the high injury network and with Vision Zero that one of the most significant contributors to the severity of collisions and the fatality of collisions is speed. And to be stuck in this situation where you can't enforce at all unless you raise the speed limit is stupid, illogical, and just wrong. So that's my rant. And now we are at this point where, as a result of our Vision Zero work, we have gone out, LAPD and DOT have done a bunch of the surveys. And what's now before us is whether or not we incorporate the surveys, which in some cases do allow us to lower the speed limit, and in a number of cases require us to raise the speed limit. So if you guys could sort of elaborate on that and be more specific, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So good afternoon, council members. Nader Asmar from LADOT. So we are here today to get your approval on a draft ordinance to update speed limits on 80 street segments in the city. This report and ordinance includes about 94 miles of speed limit increases, 52 miles of speed limit decreases, and about 9 miles of new speed limits that are not in the LAMC right now. So in the last year, we've completed 553 miles of speed surveys, which is pretty high, actually. We've brought the citywide percentage of enforceable miles from 19% to 53% in that period of time.
I just want to underscore that. Before these surveys, we could only enforce the speed limit on less than 20% of our streets.
That's correct.
That's almost as astounding as the state law. And this will bring us up to slightly over 50%.
Over 50%. Additionally, we've focused our efforts on the high injury network streets, and our efforts have resulted in bringing the enforceable mileage percentage on the HIN from 22% to 72% as of today. So with today's action, we will be able to reach our goal of achieving 100% enforceability on the HIN this calendar year. As you will recall from previous discussions, speed is the greatest predictor of crash severity. Therefore, speed enforcement is fundamental in bringing down the number of severe and fatal crashes in Los Angeles. We appreciate the Council's understanding that some enforcement of a higher speed is preferable to no enforcement at all. We also share your frustration on the inflexibility that is mandated by state law and are actively working to change that law. In preparation for this report, we have met with all the council offices to discuss the streets that are on the list that they have in their districts. We've also informed neighborhood councils, schools that are affected by the changes. We have the full support of LAPD in the process. The Transportation Commission has also recommended approval of this ordinance. The City Council was also instrumental in providing resources to undertake this effort. We received some additional resources in the past year. I could go over what resources we received if you'd like, but otherwise I would just ask that you approve the ordinance as it is written in order to allow us to have 100% enforcement of the HIN.
LAPD, either of you want to add anything?
I do. I wanted to publicly thank DOT for their efforts, so much fantastic work they've done getting these surveys out there so that our police officers can start slowing everyone down. It is absolutely critical in every collision to the safety of bicyclists, pedestrians, and other motorists that we change the speeding culture of Los Angeles, and the only way we can do that is through enforcement and education. As far as the LAPD goes, we completely understand how it goes against what we want to do in raising speed limits, but trust in the fact that we will be able to save lives with the higher speed limits, with officers out there slowing everyone down, conducting enforcement.
Thank you. I'm Troy Williams from Valley Traffic Division. Last June when I was here and I spoke and I gave the presentation, I just want to remind everyone the study that was conducted, 48-state study that shows when you raise the speed limit as much as 15 miles an hour or even lower it as much as 15 miles per hour, the 85th percentile only changes 1 mile per hour. So when we say we're raising speeds, we're not raising speeds. The speed limit might get raised from 35 to 40, but the 85th percentile is still going to be the same. And I've seen that year after year after year. So I don't want everybody to think by raising the speed limit means people are going to drive faster. What it means is we can now focus on targeting the aggressive speeders, the ones that are driving much faster than that's safe for those conditions. Thank you.
So if you have a 45-mile-an-hour zone, a 40-mile-an-hour zone now, it may be raised to 45, but currently, if it's posted as 40, but we don't have a survey, you can't issue a ticket to somebody going 65.
Not until they go 66. Once they go 66 and faster, then we can enforce it via the maximum state law, but not the prima facie law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We also had one speaker card from Mr. Englander's office. Eric Moody, you want to come up? And Mr. Englander wanted to read something into the record.
Good afternoon. Eric Moody, Planning and Transportation Deputy for Councilman Mitchell Englander. He wanted to be here, but he asked me to read a letter into the record for him. Councilmember Mike Bonin and members of the Transportation Committee, as the chair of the Public Safety Committee and a reserve police officer, I support the changes proposed here today because it is critically important that we are able to enforce speed limits on city streets. Since our hands are tied with respect to state law, we truly do not have a choice. The only decision before you is either no enforcement, which means more traffic collisions with the possibility of great bodily injury or death, or approve the changes as recommended and allow our police officers to properly enforce speed laws. It's that simple. While I personally do not like the idea of ever raising speed limits, the reality is we are not. The surveys are based on the average speed that drivers are already driving on these particular streets with a ceiling limit limiting the increase. In addition, other laws will still have to be followed on these streets, such as 25-mile-per-hour speed limits in school zones while children are present. Until the time comes that we can change state law, we need to ensure that our police officers have the necessary tools to enforce against speeding in a safe manner that protects both the officers and the public. As the LAPD Valley Traffic Division Officer Troy Williams has said, if a city like Los Angeles has unenforceable speed limits, that is a recipe for disaster. Thank you for your consideration of this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Martinez?
I have a few questions. So, do any of these changes, are any of them near schools, and did you individually notify the school of these possible changes coming? I know you sent a letter to, I forgot his name, at LAUSD, but did we notify the school directly?
Normally, we work with Brad Smith, who's the liaison for LAUSD.
Yeah, I know.
For LAUSD, we just went through Brad Smith, and he notifies the schools.
So do you know for sure if he did or didn't?
I don't know for sure.
Okay, we need to double check that because that's going to be a nightmare for some of us.
Also, for the private schools, we did notify each private school individually.
I just wish we would have done that as well with the schools that are being impacted directly. Can we do that? Can we just go ahead and take it upon ourselves to notify the school directly of these changes coming? Because that is something that we need to, because, you know, I drive my kid to school every morning and things change. People get all, they're not going to complain to their store board member. They're going to call me. So that's one of the reasons that I think we should just not rely on anyone else and just take it upon ourselves and notify the principal so that they can, that person can notify the parents at the school. Did you have something else?
Yes, when a speed limit is changed, doesn't matter, on a street in front of a school, the 25 mile per hour is posted is the maximum limit, period. It doesn't matter if it's been raised, we can still enforce 25.
You're right, but I still take, for example, if I'm taking Balboa to get to my kid's school, I'm still using that major street to get to my school. So if that school is going to be impacted, that's a major corridor by which parents drop their kids. So we need to just notify the school directly.
Yes,
Please just do me that favor. And the other thing I want to do, so how can we be assured that if we raise the speed limit on these streets, that we're not going to be setting ourselves up to continue to raise the speed limits in 10 years? So, for example, if a street is now 30 miles an hour, it was 30 miles an hour 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's not going to end up being 45 miles an hour 10 years from now.
We can't ensure that, but
Okay, I hate this thing too, and I know you use the word stupid. I have other language, which I will keep to myself, but that's what I was, because we're gonna get those calls. So how do we make sure that we're not setting ourselves up? So you just answered it, never mind. You just,
Brian Gallagher, Transportation.
unless we change state law, you're saying there's nothing that could happen.
Change the state law or redesign the street or have a cop out there 24/7.
So which is now, the cop, yeah, it's not gonna happen. Okay, so it all goes back to dealing with Sacramento and finding a way to change state law. Okay.
A lot of these streets where we're raising the speed limit are on the high injury network. And so for those corridors, we do have specific programs in mind. We know where we're raising the speed limit, and we go back and we can do other types of improvements or elements on those streets down the road after we have the enforcement that will hopefully cause the speeds to be reduced and drivers to go slower, so that in the future, when the speed limit expires and we have to come back to you when we resurvey that street, the goal is to get the speeds to go down with the combination of the enforcement, the education, and the engineering.
yes, and we will notify all those schools immediately.
Just cover all of our bases.
For sure, yeah.
Trust me.
If I can add one thing, Victory, Woodley, Havenhurst, and Van Owen are streets that had been increased in the past, and the 85th percentile didn't change at the next time the survey was done. In fact, Parthenia is actually recommended to be lowered by 5 miles an hour. So that philosophy doesn't really work very well on a street that has multiple signals and cross-traffic things. That would apply more to a interstate highway where there's nothing going to interfere with the flow of traffic. So the worry that it's going to keep creeping up 5 miles an hour every time it gets done is actually is misinformation, and that's what that study shows.
That's just a question I had. No one told me this. I was just asking whether we're setting ourselves up for that or not. You just answered my question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kretz.
Yeah, first of all, on the legislation, I think it actually, as I understand it, I'm not sure I got the right story or not, it made sense for the purpose that it was written for rural speed traps. So you might have a street that's practically a highway in a rural area that should be a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they'd make it 25, and literally nobody could keep themselves to 25, even if they were trying on a completely empty street. And so they were just writing up one ticket after another. So this was designed to prevent that from happening. It's completely irrelevant to urban areas like ours.
I've never served in the state legislature, but Mr. Correz, why haven't we been able to fix this in Sacramento? What is the issue?
Well, I don't know personally, because I haven't been involved in this effort prior to now, but I think we probably haven't.
Lobbied by who?
But we probably also haven't address this in an on-target way. We've probably just tried to overturn the law rather than to limit it to rural areas and lose the objection from places that actually need the law. So I'd say we should look at customizing our approach, find an author, and if T Committee leads, or I should say the Transportation Department leads the effort and you can't find an author, work with all of us. We'll find an author for you, and we probably need to be a little more active in lobbying it. I haven't done it often, but I've gone up a couple times since I've been out, and I've been able to help get things passed. I think with the right effort, we can do it. So
we need to, and we should see if the AARP would join us and some young parents.
We have a lot of leadership in Sacramento from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a different way. I don't know the history behind this or why we haven't been able to move, but we have a number of people that represent the city of LA. If no one's paying attention that we're the hit and run capital of the world, the country, if not the world, then it serves us no good. But I agree. I mean,
and maybe even
AAA out lobbies us.
Maybe even try to work with AAA rather than just trying to overturn this, and see if they're representing the rural areas and that's their main focus. Maybe we can find an answer.
Jen Cohen, go ahead.
Hi.
I know you can.
Jen Cohen, Director of Government Affairs for DOT. This is one of our council-approved legislative proposals from earlier this year, and we continue to work on that, and we are dedicated to looking at it for the next coming year as well.
I do think it would be worthwhile for maybe a few of us to go up on a specific trip to sort of coordinate us talking to legislators that we happen to be close with. And I'm curious, any knowledge of whether or not the League of Cities has ever made this an issue?
I'm not sure in recent history if it has been. I think that with Vision Zero gaining popularity throughout the state, that there's definitely an appetite statewide. It would be terrific to have council support up in Sacramento as well.
Yeah, we should see if the League of Cities will engage. I know Mr. Englander in particular and Mr. Bruscaino are heavily engaged.
Although, again, we'd probably have to work on the specifics of how we write it, because there may be many representatives of the League of Cities who have an interest in dealing with the rural question.
Excuse me, in 1999, that was actually put up for the state legislator to remove that requirement of an engineering study for purposes of the officer in court, and Assemblyman Hertzberg helped push that through. But instead of removing that requirement and leaving the speed limits where they were, what they did was they gave us extensions from 7 years to 10 years before they had to be done, gave us school zones and senior zones. So they gave us some concessions, but they didn't remove that requirement.
So I think obviously we should all work together on that. I think we can make it happen. As far as the actual recommendations, I'd like to ask that a couple of streets in my district be removed. The one I've gotten the most opposition to has been Overland, where various kinds of traffic problems have been created by Expo, but one of them is that the street has been widened and become somewhat of a freeway or thoroughfare. But the community, down to every last person I've spoken to at community meetings, want to leave the speed limit where it is rather than raise it and start this process that supposedly doesn't happen, but I think can happen on a couple of these streets. So I'd like to ask that Overland be removed, and I'd also like to ask that the portion of Olympic Boulevard in Council District 5 be removed. We've gotten complaints from schools, we've gotten complaints from neighborhood groups and neighbors, and so I'd like to ask those two streets be considered. And I know there's been precedent. I remember Tom LaBonge having a couple streets removed from his package for similar reasons a few years ago.
You spoke his name and he appeared.
He did not.
He did.
Who?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
Are you kidding me?
Don't do that again, Mr. Kratz.
Oh, my God. A big round of applause for Tom LaBonge.
Now, I know he didn't come here for this item, but I just mentioned you, and you magically appeared.
That was... Send him to Sacramento. I will...
You may.
Hi, Mr. City Attorney, will you handle that for me? Thank you very much.
You look great.
Two things. Thank you. You look too.
Waiting for permission was never your thing when you were here.
No. I'll take a moment. I've been driving now, and I do long streets. I don't have to rush as much. If I'm down in San Pedro, I drive up Avalon. If I'm coming from the west side, I'll go over Florence or go over Venice or whatever the case may be. People speed. And I think the only way to do it is not to raise the speed limit, because that will only increase it. And I just think there's two things most important. Number one, I think you should entertain the concept of cameras on large streets. I think of Forest Lawn Drive in Mr. Rue's district in Griffith Park, from Barham to Traveltown. People speed. So what are they going to end up sooner at Forest Lawn? You know, figuratively, as well as maybe whatever. Point being, where there's big streets that say I could speed, use cameras. Why not? We fought it. If you remember cameras, it was more on the contractor side and poor management of the contract administration by LA City at the time. But don't be afraid to, and I'm talking if they're going 15 miles over the speed limit. And the last thing I would say, I've tried to get, thank you very much, the bell still works. I've tried to get a deputy chief in charge only of traffic for LAPD, but never succeeded. He has multiple duties, including Metropolitan Division and other things as well. That's something next year you should do in the budget. And the last thing I will say, which I did not get done, but I would just say that, thank you very much, Lieutenant. I would say that in the October, it's 6 months from the budget. Every October, you should have as you treat the budget, all on infrastructure, because it gets away from you. The only way you can get things done in this building is you walk the halls and you make the others aware and encourage them to do it, but infrastructure. Anyway, it's nice to be here.
Mr. LeBlanc, I accept your offer to form a foundation to raise funds for all these cameras. Sure. And we'll report back in 30 days on your efforts
I'm free, I will. Good to see you, but speed kills. That's what they used to say at the Coliseum, because Cliff Branch was the great number 21 for the Raiders. And they made a street sign that said speed kills, but speed does kill, right, officer?
That's right.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions of me?
Nope. Do you have a question for? It really was.
So how did that?
Are there anything else you want to say that make it magically appear?
Well, I'm not going to say anything.
Did you wish for the legislature to change the law instead?
I'm not going to say anything about Donald Trump, or he'll walk through the door too.
Yeah. So let me ask a question of Nader, because I'm for my own district. I'm very concerned about putting up a sign that isn't real. I don't want to have a sign up anywhere that says 35 miles an hour if it's actually not enforceable. My experience in my district is, because I used to think, all right, well, at least dupe people into maybe obeying the speed limit. But I've learned it's the design of the street that dictates the speed, and people ignore it no matter what. So I certainly want the surveys honored in my district. The second street Mr. Corrett's named starts in his district, ends in my district, and it's an area where I've seen some speeding. Certainly not during rush hour, because you can't move at that time, but I've seen speeding there as I'm leaving my field office at 9 or 9:30 at night or so. So can we segment that the way he is suggesting?
The way the guidelines are written, we're not really supposed to segment streets like that, only if the conditions change on that roadway. So let's say the roadway narrows, or the number of lanes changes, or say, maybe bike facilities are introduced in the middle, then we could segment it. But if it's consistent throughout, we should maintain the same speed limit.
Does essentially the border between our districts of the 405 serve as sufficient demarcation?
Not necessarily, because we have a lot of major roads that cross these streets that don't necessarily change the character of the main street as you go past it.
Is there any other justification we can think of for making a line of demarcation?
How about if we tell them to do it anyway and let the chips fall where they may?
As long as there's an understanding here that there will not be enforcement on that particular section that isn't at the proper level, because as Chief Deputy Williams testified, they can't enforce unless they're going 66 miles an hour. And there's a concern, obviously, on the part of the city that we're creating a very dangerous situation if we're not enforcing our speed limits. We've seen it. And it's better to enforce a speed limit, as you've testified, even if it's 5 miles more, because it doesn't change the critical speed. Therefore, you can finally catch a lot of these people until we can change the law in Sacramento. I think it creates a much safer environment for the city.
If I may say one more thing, there is good news. You've all three mentioned to me and to the people up here about if they raise it, if you approve it, and then next time the critical could go up, or the AFib could go up. Well, let's say, for example, you approve these changes today, and then 10 years from now, you come back here again, the board can say no at that time. Say, well, now we raised it once. You can stop it at that point. You don't have to let it go on and on.
Yeah, I'm just.
And I'm willing to bet that won't happen. I won't either. But I'm willing to bet that won't happen, because I've seen it from my 20 years in working Valley traffic of the streets that have increased, that the 85th percentile, which where this number set at hasn't changed. It's always been around 40 to 44 in those streets. And even though they raised the speed limit as much as 35 to 45, that critical speed didn't change.
I appreciate that, but I've served with Mr. Koretz long enough to know that you didn't just change his mind. And Mr. Koretz still wants to segment out the stretch of Olympic east of the boundary of the mutual boundary of our district. Dan?
Yeah, let me make one other point. Could actually be an interesting sort of pilot program, because if we did half of one and half of the other, we could also look in a couple of years at what the results are. And if it turns out that Mr. Bonin's section is doing better, then we rejoin them.
Good afternoon. Dan Mitchell, Assistant General Manager with LADOT. So while we can't break up that speed zone segment without any major discontinuity, as Mr. Asmar mentioned, I think if it's the direction of the committee, you could direct that the ordinance read that the speed limit be from one point to the 405 freeway and another speed limit from there to there. Still not going to be enforceable right by radar because it wasn't part of this. It wasn't the findings of the speed zone.
What boundary were you proposing, Mr. Koretz, for the Olympic?
Well, I think you actually proposed it. I think the 405 is.
Yeah, I would suggest, since the 405 is sort of in the middle of a block, if at least we could do Sepulveda, probably makes
that would be
more
fine.
sense, since it's an actual intersection.
Actually, I have a question. I used to prosecute these for Chief Williams.
West LA.
How much space do you need, for instance, if somebody's coming from Mr. Koretz's district? When do you start the radar gun? Because somebody could actually come into Councilmember Bonin's district at a high rate of speed, and you're not starting that radar gun.
We can only enforce with the radar laser where the segments are authorized. So at the Sepulveda, if that's the mark, and they're going westbound through approaching Sepulveda, even if they're speeding, we'd have to wait till they hit Sepulveda before we can actually take that measurement.
And that's when you start clocking the gun?
Yes.
Right. Creates a very dangerous situation at that intersection. A very busy street, actually.
Well, it actually shouldn't, in theory, create any kind of a situation, because you're going from 35 to 40, but supposedly the speed limits have no impact on the actual speeds that people are driving. So it then shouldn't have any impact at all.
Yeah, but I understood that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Mr. Koretz's proposal is to approve the recommendations before us today, with the exceptions of Overland Avenue in CD5 and the stretch of Olympic in CD5 to the western boundary of Sepulveda. Correct?
Yes.
Any objection? Okay. And that's the direction of the committee.
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to acknowledge Brian Gallagher, for all the work that he did in helping to prepare this, as well as Nader Asmar and his team. This was a tremendous amount of work. There were 200 pages in this report, and if you look through those, you'll see Brian's signature probably 100 times.
Nah, we don't like Brian. I'm kidding. My staff adores him. We all do. Big fans. See, that's the smile we love.
You learned it from the public comment or from Ms. Martinez? Let me double down on the thanks to Brian and to Nader, and to DOT in general and LAPD in general for the work done on this. If we move this to council quickly enough and the ordinance gets approved, we will have the ability to start enforcing by the first of the year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Amen. From 19 to 53% or 52% or whatever we wind up in. That's a good day's work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the board, because last summer you're the ones that gave direction to DOT to move forward with this. Thank you very much. Last summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Nothing else on the agenda? Okay, we are adjourned.